So we're gonna go ahead and start, and we'll start with the prayer real quick. I'll share this one. That way, there's not so much like movements in the audio. So I'll share as we ask questions. He'll connect when he gets a chance. I think he was like, who? No, not today. Okay. So everybody bow their heads and we'll pray real quick. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, Señor, otra vez damos las gracias, Señor, porque pudimos glorificar tu nombre a través de los cantos de esta tarde, Señor. En esta mañana, Señor, venimos ante ti para aprender la palabra. Te damos honra y gloria por eso, porque tú nos dejaste esta Biblia, Señor, estas palabras y estas escrituras para poder escudriñarlas, y es lo que vamos a hacer en esta tarde, Señor. En todo sea en el Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo.
Yeah, no, but I think it's because of like where you're at though. It might be because of the computer. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. So I start. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start with the questions. Did everybody get the questions? I know Abraham, you might have not Abraham. Sorry, his brother's name is Abraham. Matthew, you might not have gotten it, but did everybody else get the questions and had time to kind of like at least think them through? Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's go to the first question. What are some of y'all's thoughts in regards to why the Bible is difficult to read? Or has anybody been able to just read it and be like, yeah, I got it all? No. Okay. You read 3 chapters so far. Here, Edenia, since you were the first one, why is it difficult for you to understand?
Not for me, for other people. Okay, I put that the Bible is difficult to read for people who have little understanding of it. It can also be difficult because the Bible tells us the truth and sometimes it's hard for us to accept it.
I said because there's so many words in the Bible that we don't understand.
Wait, we're going this way.
I put different times, and things apply different now. You know, we can apply different now, and the writing style.
I put 3 different things. There's like a lot, like a non-stop list, but these are 3 things I put. I put that you have to connect back to history, like actual history that we learn in school and stuff, and then making connections to your life. So what is your point of view and what God is telling us in the Bible? Like, you see how everybody receives messages in different ways. And then I put something similar to Gigi, like the literature and the writing is different than what we're used to.
What I'd say is like, just like Diana said, there's a lot of words that we don't see, and like people sometimes think like there's so much information I don't understand, so I'm not gonna read it because I don't understand this book. So you have to have, like, not necessarily know everything, but you have to have some knowledge about it.
Did anybody want to say something else? Oh, Perla.
Maybe like what Gigi said, like there's a lot of words that people don't understand. The literature is different, and there's so much content to cover. You have to connect back to history, like Vanessa said, and yeah.
Yeah, so all of those, I think that you guys covered them, pretty much all of them. It's like the literature is different. So it's not a Western literature. It's more of like an Eastern. The time, it's not today's time, not 21st century. It's like ancient times at certain points, like Genesis. Do you want to say something? Oh, I'm sorry.
I said it's difficult to understand because we make it difficult to understand because there's a saying like for example with my pre-cal class, it's like difficult to understand because it's like new material, and when it's new material it's like hard to understand, like put all those formulas. So it's kind of the same thing, like when we like read like this new material, when we've been like living a certain lifestyle, it's hard to understand like how can you live this certain way or something. Yeah, that's kind of it.
I put that Jesus spoke to his disciples in parables. That's what it's called, right? Parables, and as we can see in Matthew 13:10, when they ask him like, It says the disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. However, whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." So basically, like whoever doesn't know the word, like they'll get less. Whoever has, the word, will get more of the word. And Jesus used a lot of everyday examples in life. He used metaphors and taught from those everyday example. It's like he wanted to us to build a puzzle on it. So he didn't make it easy on us for not everybody to understand. It's like just not anybody can read it and understand it for a reason. And then also like in Proverbs 25:2, it said, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out of the matter is glory of the kingdom." So it's basically it's glory to God to get the word, but trying to explain it or trying to get more from it. It's from the kingdoms.
Did you gonna say something? No, everybody, like I said, everybody got that. The whole different language, different time. Sometimes what you said too, it's you run across certain things in the text. You're like, why is God? We've been taught God is good, but then there's times where God's punishing people, and you're like, what? And you kind of why is He doing that? And then that's a good one too. The verse is really, really nice to kind of conclude everybody's thoughts. It's if you don't, he said, Jesus gave all these parables, but it's he said, what is it? What was the last thing that you said or what was the verse? It's
It's not for, I think he's saying it's not for everybody, right?
no, it's the Proverbs, the first one.
Oh, the Proverbs, yeah. No. Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and there will be in abundance.
So that lets you guys know that God's saying Jesus is saying all these things, but he's saying, I've already given it to you. And so to me, it seems like it's something that he had already given to us in the scrolls, which a lot of times, I don't know about you guys, and I ran across this with a coworker. I was talking to, we carpool, and she said, I was talking about how that we read scripture, and she's like, I don't go to the Old Testament, I go to the New Testament, because she's like, the Old Testament's so hard to read. But like you said, that's found in the beginning. It's Jesus is telling you, hey, I already gave it to you. It's in the Old Testament. It's if you go back to the beginning, it's all there. And as we read as we read the beginning, Genesis, you'll start seeing a lot of the stories parallel to what Jesus talked about in the New Testament. And it'll all start making sense why he said the things that he said in the New Testament, because he had already said them in the Old Testament, or mentioned in the Testament, Old Testament. Okay, whew. I'm out of breath. Define God. You wanna, yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're kind of going. Let's just do a couple, because I think we're kind of running out of time, anyways.
I don't know how to say it in English, pero I don't know how to say it in English, but eterno y todopoderoso.
Omnipresent, meaning He is everywhere. Wait, I have one.
I said powerful, King of Kings, merciful, fair, loving, and caring.
The creator of all things.
I put alpha and how do you say omega? Yeah, that's what I put.
Omnipotent, omniscient, and the creator of all things living.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean that's pretty much what everybody's usually going to describe, right? As far as those are, I guess, the words you can say. So, all right, and then.
So all of those things that you have in mind that you just mentioned, what was it? What did Gigi? Who was the first one to said anything? Danny, you said. Somebody said the creator, all knowing, and all those things. Just keep that in mind, because we're gonna go into depth of this in a couple.
What that means.
Yeah. Next. So who is the author of Genesis?
Pick one.
Pick one.
Moses?
How do you know it's Moses? She searched it up. So, yeah, it's Moses. It's never really said, oh, Moses wrote the book, or it's not in like how Daniel was in first person. Did you have something to say?
No, not really, but it's a question. So you say like, yeah, okay. You say it doesn't really mention the author, like who wrote it. Yeah. Does that apply to like most books as well? Well, I mean, like I know there's a couple, but
Like usually, right? Most books will say in the very beginning, right? As far as who actually wrote it and what it's actually talking about most of the time, right? And so on this one, doesn't start off with like, who's the author of it. And so it's like it's not till like Daisy has right here. It's not till Exodus 17:14, Joshua 8:31, Luke 24:27, and then Acts 7:22 where they actually mention how Moses was, wise or whatever the case may be, right?
Well, like it doesn't say like Moses wrote Genesis. It says in Exodus 17:14, I think it says like God told him start writing these things so that there's memory of it. And then in Joshua 8:31, I think it says something like I can't remember anymore, but Luke 24:27 it mentions like, hey, just like how Moses wrote in the law. And if you remember the books of the law include Genesis. And then in Acts 7:22, it gives credentials to Moses of his knowledge and his knowledge of his knowledge and education, or his pretty much like education, and how knowledgeable he was. Okay, so what language is Genesis written in? Okay, Hebrew. Yep. And so next question is, what does Genesis mean? Okay, Adenia. Hold on. In the beginning. And what letter? And you went too fast. And it's written. If you think it's written in Hebrew, it's not. It's actually in Greek, and it's genocide. The actual Hebrew word is Bedishi. I can't pronounce it, but something like that. Bedish. But yeah. So even though it's written in Hebrew, the word Genesis is from the Greek. Okay, so here's the thing. So if you guys are standing like, okay, the place I could think about the most is like if you're standing in the airport, there's different people. Do y'all agree that there's different people of different nationalities, different religions in the airport, right? If you say, I believe in God, what do you think come across people's mind? What God, right? Huh? What did he say? Hold on. Yeah.
He said something about like what God.
If you stand in the crowd, like, yeah, people are going to say, what God? Or they could already have an image of a God. So it could be, like, of a different religion, they're like, okay, cool, like, you believe in my God. But you need to understand, like, really what God means. What's my next? So there's a problem in the word God in our society today. Not necessarily like a problem, but just the way that you use it, it sometimes becomes unclear. And you can see that when people say, oh, I believe in God. Yeah, you have a question? Oh, okay. Can you go and you want me to? Okay. What? Okay, make me walk.
This relates to saying like when you say this relates like when you say I'm a Christian just 'cause I go to church doesn't mean you're a Christian. In a way. Yeah, you gotta show it. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, but not really. It's more like it's understanding the term like or the word God. God can mean different things or a different meaning to anybody depending on like what your stance is, what background you have.
The question is more like a vague one as far as like what is it, as far as if you were to walk to somebody at an airport and say I believe in God, they're not going to ask you like, whoa, are you good in your faith? They're going to say, well, which God do you believe in? How many religions are there, right? As far as, and that's what Daisy's trying to say. That's the question is, what would people say as soon as you said that afterwards? So. Yeah,
and it goes back to like if you go to the next slide. Sorry. it's like, what image do you have when somebody says, oops, my bad. Is this one? That's fine. That's good. Yeah, so what image do you have when, like, it. What image do you. No, it's over there. What image do you have when somebody says, like, God created. God, what image do you guys have? Sorry, my notes are over here. Let's go sit here. Sorry. It's because I'm going to be out of breath. It's because I need. Oh, okay, cool. All right, sorry. I'll figure this out one day.
Taking everything down.
Now I lost my place. Yeah. So God, what do you guys think about when it said God made the world, right? Do you guys think of like this all-powerful person, all-powerful being, right? So the thing I'm trying to get at is, you keep going, next one. Next one. God is not a name. And a lot of times that's where we're stuck, that we think that God is a name. Does that make sense or no? And if it doesn't make sense, that's okay. It makes sense? God is not a name. God is, God is a title. What I mean by that is like, there's animals, right? And then you have like, I guess is that a good example?
So let's think of it this way, right? So like for instance, like your parents, right? You have a mom and a dad. Their name is not mom or dad. That's the title that's given to them, right? And so a lot of times they actually have a real name. But the thing is, do we know what his name is? And that's what Daisy's trying to get to, right? Because actually, when you look up what God, right, is defined. So if you look up God, right, there's Daisy got the definition right there, and pretty much it says right there, is the creator and the ruler of the universe and source of all moral authority and the supreme being. But that still doesn't define what his actual name is. That just pretty much says who he is, as far as what he has done. Yeah, what has that. Yeah, what it is pretty much. And so that's what we're trying to get to. It's because the reason why is because Daisy has an example is because how we've always translated things from before, and how usually in our culture, as far as when you say that name, you automatically think of what Daisy's saying. Like you automatically go to the airport and you ask somebody that you believe in God. That's the first thing that comes to your head. It's just that title, as far as it's God, and that's pretty much it, right? They don't give you more than that. So.
So we're going to still stick and try to define God in our English language. So what is the difference between God with a capital G and God with the lower G? Daniel?
With like, oops, my bad. God with like lower G. I remember my old pastor saying this is like it could be any God that is not our God. It's like any God. God with a capital G is literally our God, Father of fathers, Kings of kings.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we always have to capitalize the G.
And Annie has something?
The guy with the lowercase g, it is what he said, but it's like earthly gods, not our God. Not it's like in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
She said earthly gods.
Earthly gods?
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Did you actually? It's on. Oh, did you actually mean that? Like, what do you mean by earthly gods? As far as like
fake gods that people create.
Fake gods. Okay. Yeah. I'm just trying to make sure that we can get back to it.
Not like a real God that isn't earth.
Like you're talking about like kind of like an idol, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like a deity or something. Okay. Diana, did you have something?
I forgot. I blanked out.
You forgot? It's okay. All right, you guys. Okay, so, oops. So, do you want?
Go ahead.
Okay. So right here, pretty much says so when it's pretty much used as far as a title, it's very ambiguous, right? And do you guys know what ambiguous means? Just vague, right? Just a general form, right?
You say it, it's very confusing. But if you were to like, so if you say it's very confusing, but if you have it written out and you see the capital G or you see the lower G, you understand, right? Like you automatically, your brain goes, oh, capital G means our God or a God, Yes.
Or like a lot of times they said the God, right?
The God, yeah. So it's one particular God. And today in our society, we automatically put it as like how Gigi and Edenia and Daniel said, the Jewish God.
The highest one.
Yeah, but it can still be used as a God of one particular God.
Right.
So it's still not defining the Jewish God. It's still a title. And so that's how we kind of like identify. It's by capitalizing the G or lowercasing the G in our English language. But it's not how the word God works in Hebrew. Next. So what is the word God in Hebrew? Who? Oh my goodness. He did. I know.
Man, you can't give me new toys, you know?
Yeah, so the word God, the actual word God, the title in Hebrew is Elohim. And you guys I don't know, I've heard it when I was young. I would hear it and I'd be like, oh, it's God. But it's still not God's name. It's still the title God. Right? Got it? Everybody has it? Hold on, somebody. Do you have a question? You good? Okay, she's good. Anybody confused yet? Everybody still on track? Okay.
We're just barely there. We're going to keep going a little bit further, right? So Daisy also has it.
So here, you that's the first time we see the word Elohim in the Bible. It's in Genesis 1 where it says, in the beginning, and I'm going to change it to say Elohim, right? Elohim created the skies and the land. Everybody good there? Okay.
Right, 'cause originally, what does it really originally, what does it say as far as in the text? God, right? And it has a capital G on it too. But what we're saying as far as the Hebrew name for just God, right? The title is Elohim, right? So we're going to get a little bit further. And so I think Daisy also has.
So you will eventually, so this again, if we go back to what we were talking about, God is a title, not a name. Even in this first sentence, it's not a name. It's still a title. And it essentially means actually lowercase g. And I'll explain it. Yes, and I'll explain it. So it's a deity. So as long as you kind of understand, I'll get into that in a minute.
It'll make sense. Trust me. Give it a second.
Okay. Okay, we'll get there. Okay, and then so mainly in the Old Testament you'll see Hebrew, right? So Elohim's the word that gets used for God, and then in Greek it's what? Oh, I don't think they know.
You guys don't know?
They wouldn't know this one. It's Theos. Okay. I've heard Elohim more often than I did Theos, right? Theos? No, Elohim? Okay. So we're still on trying to define God. Okay. So if I didn't confuse you already, I only confused Vanessa so far.
There's more.
No, hold on. But Vanessa's at least admitted it. But I will hear more people admit it in a couple minutes because it's going to get confusing.
I can only see you because it's like in between Eric and Vanessa.
Okay, so Elohim is actually written in different forms in Hebrew. The first way that it's written, it's El, which is a short form. It's singular too. It's like singular. Next word, it's written 23 times. The next one is Eloah, which is another way of saying it in a singular form. 57 times in the Hebrew. The third way that it's written is Elohim, which we just introduced it, and it's actually in the long form or plural form. Am I confusing anybody? See? Yeah. So there's a couple people that are confused. So to kind of help understand at least this part for now, I'm going to use some examples. Oh, yeah. So all these three ways are written differently in the Bible, but in our Bible right now, it's all one word. So if it's ambiguous in the English word, it's more ambiguous. Or what's that word that you were using?
Vague?
Vague. It's more vague in Hebrew.
Okay.
So I'm going to help kind of make you guys understand this.
You can be more confused, but it'll come back. That's fine. Get a different mic.
Who's confused? Who? I know it. You're confused. You're confused. But does everybody understand that all these three words are God?
Right.
Right?
And we said that what is Elohim? Originally, what did we say Elohim was?
God in
God?
Hebrew, but what
God
is
in
it?
Hebrew. Plural. Plural.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And it's a title, not a
It's
name.
Title. Yeah. Title. Title. Okay. Daisy?
Okay, so here's how you can kind of like, I can kind of give you an example. So when we're talking about like the long form and short form, like think about human. Human got shortened to, does that make sense now? Like why, how it kind of gets shortened? Okay.
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
Go on. No, it's fine.
Okay. And then, or like gray or gray. How do you guys?
Who writes it with the A? It
One-
doesn't matter.
One is
One's
like,
like English, one's like American.
yeah.
It's like spelling, like we spell tire with T-I-R-E. In England, they spell it T-Y-R-E. That's it.
But it's
It's
still the
just
same
same
language, still
thing.
the same meaning. Does that it's it kind of you guys kind of following? Abraham, you're good. Danny, you're
Okay.
good. Cause
Yeah,
we're gonna
what-
ask you questions. Eric, you're good.
Okay. So Elohim.
I finished that slide.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. The other thing, go back to it.
Yep.
So you know how we said that this was all singular, and this is plural.
Not yet.
Okay, so we know how he said singular, plural, right? Well, this one here can also be identified as like a singular word. It depends on how you use it in the sentence.
And the reason why it's confusing is because we don't know Hebrew, right? But the thing is also it's because the way they use it, like Daisy's saying, it's kind of like depends on like when you write something out, you can write a sentence and actually just replace one word and make it like one person did it compared to many people did it. But it's almost the same exact word. And that's what Daisy's trying to say is when you talk about Elohim, like when you're actually reading it, like remember like the first passage we read in Genesis 1, it said, what did it say in Genesis 1?
In the beginning,
In the beginning?
Elohim.
Yep.
And then Elohim was what? Then the plural plural?
Was Elohim in Genesis 1 as far as the first verse, was that in plural or in singular?
Singular.
Singular. Because
Okay.
saying that one thing pretty much made something. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to say. So we'll see as far as later on. It's going to make more sense. Trust me.
And if
Wait a
not, we'll
second.
get your questions at the end.
Yes. Questions for at the end. Just kidding.
Okay. Go to the next slide.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're at the word Elohim. So just to help you guys bridge the gap and make sure you guys have like a kind of like a definition of what Elohim is. Elohim is a spiritual being. It's a non-physical being. So
Does that make sense just for that little statement?
So
Okay.
just to make sure, Christian is a physical. No,
I'm
he's a
not
physical. He's physical. I can touch him. It's a physical being. He's a human being, right?
flesh.
Yes. God, I hope not.
Yeah.
But does that make sense?
So physical would be like flesh, right? As far as it has a body
And where does
Right.
this flesh live?
on
Earth.
earth.
So the actual title tells you where that person's presence is. The
The spiritual.
being tells you where.
Where would be spiritual? Remember we talked about it last time in Daniel. We were talking about Daniel. We're talking about what was going, things that we couldn't see. Yeah,
Realm.
things that the realm that we could not see, and
Celestial
that's
realm.
what Daisy's saying as far as the spiritual is that those are things that we cannot see, right? So when we're talking about Elohim, we're talking about a spiritual thing that we cannot see, right? Does that make sense so far?
So,
Okay.
so are angels Elohim? Are
Okay.
demons Elohim? Are
But why would you guys say yes to that instead of just saying yes every single time? Why would you guys say that yes? Okay. Okay. I'm glad you got that one. That's the main thing. Yeah. Okay.
Hmm?
You good? I just want to make sure. That's all. Yeah, exactly.
he's testing you?
You're just chanting yes, just like.
Does anybody want to die? Amen.
Yeah. Like you said it like you said last time. Okay.
Okay.
Next.
So let's go back to Genesis 1. In the beginning, and now we took off God to
Yeah.
replace it with the actual Hebrew word, right? In the beginning, Elohim created the skies and the land.
Yep.
And remember, Elohim is like the lowercase g, and it's a singular. It's
In
singular
Hebrew.
in Hebrew.
Yep.
In the beginning, and so now if we put like the definition, a spiritual being, instead of being like a human being, it's like a spiritual being, created the skies and the land. Is there any question in this that you guys are asking yourselves? Think about it. Don't think about it like.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll turn it
so
on. All you guys. Yes.
so here's my question.
Okay.
Let me make it make sense. Let me process. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now that she replaced it, I'm sorry if I'm being slow,
It's
yeah. Like
fine.
I just
No,
want to
it's
make
fine.
sure I'm understanding.
We got time. It's Friday. Don't worry about
So
it.
in the beginning, a spiritual being created the sky and the land. Okay, a spiritual being.
Right.
So like
So the reason why we're saying a spiritual being, right? So think of it, and we have something later on to probably explain a little bit better too. What we mean by spiritual being is like you said earlier, you guys are pretty much putting categories of things into pretty much like a circle, right? If you were to draw a circle, you're saying, yep, God's in there, angels are in there, the demons are in there, all these other things, everything's in there, the cherubims and everything's in there, right? Right.
okay, so here's my part
Yeah.
2 of the question.
Yep.
So if a spiritual being, what if, and I'm probably just being like
That's fine.
difficult right now.
Sure.
What if like that spiritual being created that, but then another spiritual being created another thing, and then another spiritual being created
Exactly
another
right.
thing. Like you see, like there's Elohim, but what if like an
And that's-
example,
yeah.
Elohim Daisy did this, Elohim Chris did this, Elohim Vanessa did this,
Yep,
so there's
yep.
like multiple gods or something.
And that's the thing. That's why Daisy said, is that the question you're asking her now? Is pretty much like, does that open interpretation to say, do you believe that it's pretty much just one person doing everything, or many people doing, many things, or what it could be? But it all depends on the context of how you actually read the passage, right? So when we read Genesis 1, right, you're saying, well, what actually created that? And that's what we're trying to get to, is that point to understand that when you actually do read something, it'll make sense to you as far as when you start to like understand what you're reading, as far as like who it is that's actually doing that.
Yeah.
Go on.
So just to like, just to kind of like give you an example of a different spiritual being, and you kind of said it like Christian spiritual being. Of course, Christian doesn't have like a Elohim yet because he's still flesh, he's physical. But let's go back to like, sorry.
No, they said that they're trying to kill me back there.
Oh.
I think that's what. Oh.
I'm just.
Oh. They said they're gonna kill me. I was like, wow. Okay.
I'm just gonna
my
give you
bad.
something that I found very, very interesting that I thought that it now makes sense to me,
Sure.
knowing about the plural forms and all this thing. So let's go to the next slide real quick. This is from a passage in. Can you go to the next slide?
You have a bunch of
Whoa.
them. Looks like a bunch of the stuck ones.
Okay, sorry. This is from a passage in Samuel chapter 28. Does anybody know the story about whenever Saul went to
A sorcerer.
a sorcerer to. Okay, he went to go get a sorcerer to bring who back? Samuel back.
Look at
Yeah,
you
they know
guys.
their
Look at you
stories.
guys.
Okay, so, and you guys know it, but if you guys, like, you know it in your head, but, like, if you read it, it sounds really weird. Okay, here it is. I'm going to read it in Spanish because this one's in King James Version. I just put it on there so you can see that it has gods. But it says, Y la mujer respondió a Saúl, he visto dioses, and that's in plural, right? Que suben de la tierra. And then later on, she says, un hombre, and then she's describing, un hombre anciano viene cubierto de un manto. And then he identifies him. Oh, era Samuel, y Samuel dijo, Saúl, ¿por qué me has inquietado haciéndome venir? So, back to the word Elohim. Oh, sorry. Man, where's the little, like, laser?
Laser here.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay,
She did not believe it, and now she is. She does.
I can't reach
We
it.
gotta believe her.
Okay, so here it says dioses, but then there over here in the next sentence it says un hombre. So why would they say dioses and then identify it as one person? No. I
No.
was like, no, no.
Incorrect.
Because remember Elohim means in plural, but here it's talking about one Elohim. And whose Elohim is that?
So who's the Elohim that they're referring to in the passage?
No.
No, the sorcerer pretty much brought back somebody, right? So hold on. Okay. So in the very beginning, right, they're talking about pretty much. So Saul goes and pretty much talks to the sorcerer to bring back who? Samuel, right? And so during that process, the sorcerer's pretty much doing the thing, right? And they bring back, right? They bring him back, and as she's pretty much bringing him back, they're pretty much saying that's the description that she's saying as far as what's happening. So let's just do it in English, right? So the woman said unto Saul, pretty much, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. So wait, if we're talking about spiritual beings, right, where are they at? Where do we always think that they're at all the time? In the sky, right? So and pretty much what Daisy's trying to say is that when she said God, she's replacing this with Elohim. When I saw pretty much Elohims ascending out of the earth. Now what are we talking about? No. So what happens to you when you die? Yeah. You're no. Just you're human, you're flesh. Yeah, you're underground, right? You're in the grave. So where's Samuel at right now? If he died, where was he going to be at? Underground. So pretty much saying they saw pretty much Elohim, spiritual beings, coming out from the ground. Right? So now what Daisy's trying to say is pretty much they're seeing the people that were pretty much dead as far as buried, like Samuel was, and he's getting lifted out as far as from his body, right? As far as his physical body, his flesh, and now he's pretty much a spiritual being. And that's what they're talking about right now, is that even Samuel, whenever he's pretty much out of his body, he has now become an Elohim because he's a spiritual being. So what Daisy's trying to define is Elohim isn't so much for gods, but it's so much as that it's not a person that actually has a body.
It's a non-physical.
It's a non-physical body. So when
a spiritual being.
A spiritual being.
It has not. It's no physical being.
But that's what Daisy's trying to say. Yeah, exactly. Daisy's trying to say when you see gods, she's talking about. Remember? No.
In this, yeah.
Yeah.
In this case, it's like, yes. Yes.
Exactly right. You want to ask that?
Yeah. She said, "Are angels?"
Are angels considered Elohims?
Yes, because they're spiritual
Yeah,
beings. They're
spiritual
not
beings.
non-physical.
Not a flesh.
Not a flesh. So in this case, it's God's. But what I was trying to also say is like what she really saw was one spiritual being. But because Elohim is a plural word, it's here as in God's.
Because if we were to read that, right, and the reason why we're doing all this is because if we're trying to read something and we're like, okay, we get to 1 Samuel, we're like, I saw gods ascending out of earth.
She saw many gods?
Yeah, we'd be so confused. We'd be like, what does that even mean? Because to us, it wouldn't make sense. We would think of it like what Daniel was saying at first. It's like maybe like demonic things. Maybe there's like, random things pretty much coming out of the earth that's pretty much like just evil. But in reality, if you actually understand what gods can be defined, like Daisy was saying earlier with Elohim, it can be plural or it can be singular.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where pretty much, this is one of the verses that's out there in the Bible that if you were to read it, it just wouldn't really make sense unless you had the context of what it actually means in pretty much Hebrew.
So yeah, so back to it. If you replace gods to Elohim, you would see, I saw an Elohim. And whose Elohim was it? Samuel's.
Exactly. Does that make sense? Okay.
Vanessa? Yeah?
Okay.
Spirits.
Spirits.
Spiritual beings.
Mhm.
Yes.
So how did Samuel talk to Saul?
They brought him back.
Yeah, sorcerer.
It's a spiritual being.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
you're saying now, like, how can you speak to an Elohim? Or how can you have a conversation with the Elohim?
there's
What happened in Daniel?
Yeah.
We just read about Daniel.
Daniel was talking to the angels.
Remember? And what
And
happened to
even-
him?
Humans can. I can't say like I can, but humans have. You seen it in the Bible?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a whole nother question.
Yeah.
We're not getting there.
But okay, let's go back to like that's just an example, okay? Just to show you how the word works.
Okay. Very good.
Yes, good.
Okay. So now that we covered that pretty much you have a circle, right, and you're calling all these things pretty much Elohim, and you're dropping all these little pretty much names or things into that circle you're calling Elohim. Now, what is the actual title for God as far as the one single God that we're talking about all the time? What, sorry? Name, sorry. Wait, obviously right there, Yahweh, right? Okay, that's something. Okay, so this is referring to pretty much the capital G, if not whenever they pretty much have another title in front of them. So, like, I pretty much have it right here, both English and Spanish, right? So you can see right there it says, the generations of the heavens and the earth, they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. But in Hebrew, when you actually put Lord God, or even in Spanish it says Jehová Dios, it's pretty much referring to Yahweh, right?
So Yahweh Elohim.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty much the title.
The name.
The name, yeah,
And
and
then
the
the
title. Yeah, exactly. Make sense?
What about when it only says Elohim by itself?
Exactly.
It's God.
Referring to Yahweh?
Spiritual being. Because they will pretty much talk about, as far as it's a thing. When you get into the title, when you actually read it, you'll start to understand who it is. And that's what the main thing that we're going to be talking about in Genesis is when you read it, what are you referring to? Or who is it that you're referring to? Yes.
His
Yes.
name. It's like
His
your
name.
name is Vanessa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Or yeah.
Sure.
So Elohim is everything equal to a lowercase g.
It can be, and it can be. It's the same thing. It can be one thing or the other thing.
And Elohim equal to God, like
Yes.
capital G?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So in that case, that will be Yahweh as well.
Exactly right.
And
Yes.
yeah.
That one, like it's like right in your face. Here you go.
That
That's
is
what we're
his
talking about. Yeah. Does that make sense so far? Okay.
That
So-
makes sense.
There we go. So English language, right? That's what we talked about earlier. Jehovah, Lord God. That's what we're saying. It's pretty much is Yahweh, right? And then obviously Hebrew language is Yahweh. There's pretty much how you can, if you want to spell it out in Hebrew, knock yourself out. And yeah, try. And then so for Yahweh, this is the thing that actually makes it kind of important, though, right? So for the Jewish people, right? When they actually used the name Yahweh, it was very sacred to them, right? So it's pretty much as a form of the Hebrew name of God used in the Bible. The name created came to be regarded by Jewish people as a sacred, it's too sacred to be spoken. So a lot of times when they were going to refer to God, you know, they didn't try to just say it all the time. It was something so sacred that you really only wanted to say it whenever, like, it was, like, necessary to do it. You didn't just spit it out whenever you wanted to, kind of like, oh, whatever, no big deal, like people do today. That's not what the thing was. And so for them, what they decided to do was they decided to actually, instead of saying Yahweh all the time, as far as this is the Jewish people, right, obviously, what they didn't, instead of them saying it all the time, they changed it. So instead of saying Elohim, as far as referring to God and just making it very vague, they decided to change it from Yahweh to, what's called Adonai, right? Adonai, sorry. So, so that's pretty much, that's
So
the same
Adonai
name
is equivalent to
E-
Yahweh.
Yahweh.
It's
Exactly
the
right.
name, but Yahweh's more sacred. Very,
Yeah.
very sacred.
Right.
Like how you say.
I'm trying to remember, like, I remember when we were little, and I don't know if you remember that, but you had a presentation on that. It was like, Adonai is literalmente Señor, like literally Lord. And then El Shaddai is el Dios Todopoderoso. And then, like, it continued with the other stuff. Yeah, yeah.
It's getting there, right?
Those-
It's going.
yeah, so I was telling Chris, for those that were raised or born into it, Vanessa, Eric, Junior, Abraham, all you guys, it'll all start. All those things that we were taught with little kids are going to start even making more sense, and your eyes are just going to be like, wow. And
Yep.
then those like Christian and maybe Gloria is going to be a good foundation for your like
For sure.
growth.
Yep.
Which Gloria, if you're not here, okay.
So far, you guys are good? Does it make sense so far? Okay, on to the next one. So, Jason.
Do you have a question?
Okay.
Okay, so what Abraham was saying, he was like, wait, is Elohim God? So to answer that question, Yahweh is Elohim,
Yep, he can
Good.
be Elohim.
but no other Elohim is Yahweh. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Elohim is a place of residence, which means the celestial realm, right? Or
like what you said as far as heaven, you're pretty much saying that's like its
as an
place.
example, right? Just think
Yeah.
about that in your head. And then the word tells you what the proper domain is for that being. So humans, our proper domain is here on earth. Elohims are pretty much like in a different realm, not
Right.
here on earth.
Does that make sense?
And that comes
Okay.
from a person who is very well known. His name is Michael Heiser.
Okay.
Oh.
So
So the confusion we talked about at the beginning all comes down to this discrepancy where our word God is specified to a type of divine being, the all-powerful. So yeah, that's why it's sometimes confusing, because we are automatically, because we know so much, we just
shoot there.
yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
just
I have a video for you guys. Okay. You guys like videos? It's gonna cover exactly what we said, but maybe in a better way. Yes, it is. Okay. So let's see if it plays.
When most people think about the story of the Bible, they think of a story about God and humans.
But remember, we learned that there's a whole other cast of characters that appears throughout the Bible. Only one is the source and creator of all things, including the Elohim. That's
They think of a story about the story of the Bible. They think of a story about God and humans.
But remember, we learned that there's a whole other cast of characters that appears throughout the Bible and plays a really important role.
Oh, right. Spiritual beings, angels, demons, and the like.
Right. And in the Bible, they inhabit the heavenly realm, which is parallel to our earthly reality and actually overlaps with it.
Now, all of these spiritual beings have their own unique characteristics.
But here's what's fascinating. The biblical authors have one word that can refer to all the inhabitants of the spiritual realm. In Old Testament Hebrew, the word is Elohim, and in New Testament Greek, it's Theos. But here's the thing. This word gets translated in lots of different ways depending on which being is referred to. Angels, gods with a lowercase g, or even God with a capital G.
Wait, so one word can refer to any of these beings?
Yeah. It's because Elohim is a category title. It can designate any spiritual being that belongs to the heavenly realm.
Okay, a title, not a name. Like the word mom.
Yeah, right. The word mom can refer to lots of really different kinds of people, but they all share in common the same role in a family. And then let's say a group of brothers and sisters are talking and one says, hey, it's mom's birthday. They're using the title like it's a name.
But it would be clear that they're referring not to any mom, but their mom.
Yes, and the same goes for the biblical authors. They called their God Yahweh, which is the name revealed to Moses. But they also sometimes refer to him with the category title Elohim, using it like a name, because they all know who they're referring to.
Okay, but don't the biblical authors think that Yahweh's in a class of his own, not like any other?
They do, which is why they say things like Yahweh is the Elohim of Elohim. That is, the chief Elohim among all the others. Or they'll say, there's no Elohim beside Yahweh, meaning no other spiritual being compares to him, because only he is the ruler and creator of all things.
Okay, I'm following, but I thought the Bible taught monotheism, which means there's just one God.
Well, the biblical authors are claiming that among all of the spiritual beings out there, only one is the source and creator of all things, including the Elohim. That's biblical monotheism, that one Elohim, Yahweh, is above all other Elohim, that is, the other spiritual beings. Now, with all that said, we are ready to learn more about who these other Elohim are and how they fit into the biblical story.
Now that we talked about and discussed it and we watched it, you kind of have a visual of what it is, right? And how God is not a name.
You just watched a
title.
video.
That's another name they said? Yeah. Okay, so that first part makes sense, right? We understand that part really well. Any questions so far? No. Okay. Do you see anything before we start? Okay. Yeah, so there's another one, right? So, can anybody pronounce that? What? Ra? Okay, what do you guys think that is? What language?
Rome.
Rome? No. Okay, so it's Hebrew. Remember, we're still talking about Genesis. No. So we're still talking about Genesis, right? And so we're pretty much saying that's pretty much Hebrew. So the way you pronounce that is ruach, right? Ruach. Yeah. Okay, so you guys are good so far? Okay. So what do you think that even means before we even go to the next thing? We're talking about earlier Elohim, spiritual beings, and then we got to the point of talking about the actual name of God, right?
A greater name or evil one? But then why would the evil one even be there? This is a greater name.
Okay, let's keep going. So, in Genesis 1:2, we're talking now about the Spirit of God, right? So it says, Genesis 1:2, the earth was formless and void, the darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters, right? So right away in the beginning of Genesis, we're talking about the Spirit of God. Now, what does that mean to you guys?
The Spirit of God.
That's what it means to you guys. Spirit of God. Okay.
The Holy Spirit,
Yeah. Okay. So next one in. So next English language, Spirit, right? And then you get to pretty much Hebrew, obviously Ruach. And then Greek is.
Did you not
Sure.
research it?
I don't know how to say that. That's the
Oh,
thing. I was
okay.
like, we researched, but I was like, So Ruach, right, can mean multiple things. It can mean multiple things, right? So it can mean the breath, wind, or spirit that's all invisible. Pretty much all those things are invisible. Even though we see wind, right? And how do we see it? Because things move after it hits it. But you don't actually see the actual wind itself. You see the aftermath of it, right? And so that's pretty much what we're talking about is God pretty much has Ruach, right? But we see it after the fact, right? So how do we define the difference between Yahweh and...
Yes. Yes, Daniel? The name. Ruach. Ruach. Yeah. The spirit. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a question. I was getting there. Okay, so earlier we asked you guys define God in the very beginning, and you guys started just shouting out like random things as far as like you say he's omnipresent, he's pretty much all powerful, he's all these things, right? And those are all what? If he says right here on top, those are all attributes. It wasn't a trick question. So those are all attributes. Do you guys know what attributes are? Okay.
Yes.
Exactly right. Like even like pretty much an item, like a soccer ball is round, whatever it can be. And so those are all things that we pretty much can describe of God because it's what we actually read about him a lot of times, right? So let's see. Right here in the very beginning, Yahweh created the world from his wisdom. That's an attribute, right? So next one, he's omnipotent, yeah, omnipotent, yeah, sorry, which is pretty much all powerful, right? So next one, omnipresent, he's everywhere, right? Omniscient, yeah, he's all knowing, right? And then all the things that people always talk about, right? They say he's righteous, he's justice, he's love, and he pretty much has mercy, right?
And many more.
Yeah, and obviously there's tons more, right? But those are the things that pretty much always talk about in the beginning. It's always who he is as far as what he is a lot of times, right? So now, when we talk about pretty much the spirit or the ruach, right? How are we going to define that? How do we define, if we define God as far as the Father, as far as Yahweh, all those things, then how do we define the Spirit? Eric looks like he has something. No? You just got that face? Yeah.
Do what?
She's still trying to prove her point that the Father, the Son.
Oh, the Trinity? We're not there yet.
I think it will build eventually
Yeah.
as we go with our Bible
We
studies,
are
but
there.
but let's build on this first.
So, the Spirit, right, as far as Ruach, it's pretty much Yahweh's personal presence. It's his energy as far as that goes around. So remember in the beginning when we read Genesis 1, right, we saw that pretty much the Spirit was doing what over the waters? He was just floating over the waters. He was just pretty much just going around, right?
As even more of an example too, it's like whenever the singers we say like, "Oh, invitemos al Espíritu Santo." Let's invite his presence. Yeah, his
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then so the next one we have right here is pretty much, we talked about earlier when we defined what Ruach was, we said it's air, right? It's what's called, it's the air you breathe as far as God's Spirit sustains all life. So when we actually start reading as far as in Genesis, it's going to say that, like, what do you have pretty much inside you, right? As far as, like, you have two different things that they pretty much have in Hebrew, right? But one of those things that they always talk about is pretty much the Ruach, as far as this is God's pretty much breath that's inside you, right? And so if you have the breath as far as inside you, he's giving you life. And if you don't have that air anymore, or that breath anymore in you, then what is it? Then you're dead. Exactly right. Okay, so next one. If the wind is so powerful, then Yahweh's Spirit is also powerful, right? And we're gonna see that a little bit more later on, so give me a second. And then so we have, what does the Spirit of the Ruach actually do sometimes? It actually gives, as far as empowerment to people. And how do we know that?
We read it in Daniel.
We read it already in Daniel. Like, what happened with Daniel?
Yes.
So did Yahweh or the Ruach was helping out Daniel? The Ruach. But the Ruach belongs to who? Yahweh. Okay, cool. Everybody's kind of something. Yeah. But we're just only doing two. Give it a second. Okay. So, and also what it's supposed to do is actually supposed to change people's hearts, right? And so what other pretty much stories out there pretty much does what's called the Ruach actually help out with? No, I'm saying what people, stories. Huh?
Wait, what was your question?
Oh, Moses. Yeah, Moses, because, like, you know how Moses was like, I'm shy and everything? I'll help you. And then God was like, I'll be with you wherever you go.
Sure, yeah. I'll be with you, yeah. But yeah, that's one. And then you also have Joseph. What did Joseph do?
Interpreted dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing as Daniel. Yeah. Okay. And then also what do the prophets do? How do the prophets get their message as far as what's going to happen?
God speaks to them.
Through?
The Spirit of God.
Okay.
Ruach.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all on the same page? This wasn't too difficult for you guys. Okay. What? Okay. So we could have another video, or we can just skip it for the time being.
We can send it later.
It's
Yeah.
8:24.
We can watch it.
I'll just send it to you guys. It's just a Holy Spirit video. So I'm going to skip it. We don't have enough time.
Yeah.
It's okay. All right. So, Daisy?
So I have a question for you guys. Now that we've talked about names and all these like terms, let's just focus on Genesis, right? So the Bible that you guys have, is that how it was originally bonded? No. How is it made, huh?
How was it made as far as like
How's-
when they got
What did it look like
gathered
back in the
everything, What
days?
was it in the beginning? Was it in what?
Scrolls.
Scrolls?
Scrolls.
Scrolls? Scrolls? Scrolls?
Clay.
Oh, she's going like way back. Yeah. Okay.
That's
yeah.
in detail. But yeah,
Yeah.
they were just in scrolls, right? And so these scrolls that they have, you remember, I don't know if you guys probably seen them in like the movies that they bring all these like scrolls
Right,
and then they
open
open them.
all up. Yeah.
Well, they were never. Yeah, they're huge.
Exactly, sealed. Yeah.
Well, those scrolls didn't have chapters.
Yeah, when they wrote them, it wasn't like they wrote chapter 1, okay, end of scroll, get a new scroll, and they wrote another one, right? And that's what Daisy's trying to say.
And that's why
They wrote it
sometimes,
differently.
and that's why sometimes if you read your chapters, and we've seen it too in Daniel, where like, yeah, we'll finish the chapter, but it looks like it still goes on to the next chapter, like maybe like 2 sentences. There was one chapter.
Yep.
And the same thing, you remember? And the same thing happens in Genesis, where like, there's like a story, but like a big story, but it goes on to like the next,
next
chapter,
chapter.
but then the next chapter starts on like something else.
Yep. So that's what we're trying to say pretty much now is that when we start to read pretty much Genesis, we're not going to read it as far as chapter by chapter, as far as exactly where it ends, that's where we're going to stop. What we're going to do is actually read it in movements. So like I talked to you before, last time to you, a couple of you guys, was we're trying to look at this stuff a lot of times, like how songs work, right? A lot of times songs, you have your chorus, you have your verse, everything else, and everything is always in a section, just like a movie is. When you watch a movie, you have pretty much parts. And usually in a movie, you have 3 parts, 4 parts, depending how it's going to go. So for Genesis, the way we're going to do it, that's what Dave's saying, as far as chapters are not included, and as far as the scrolls, they're not sectioned off as chapters. They're just-
Organized.
Exactly, organized. So we're going to do pretty much, there's 4 different movements as far as Genesis. The first movement that we're going to look at is actually from Adam all the way to Noah, right? So from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 11
Verse
and the end of
26.
26, right? And then movement 2 is just the story of Abraham. So you can see pretty much the difference. It starts from 26 to 27 right here, right? So we're kind of already starting to kind of put a split in between them. And it's from chapters 11, verse 27 to chapter 25, verse 18. Movement 3 is Isaac and the Jacob story. So you have from chapter 25, 19 to 37, 1. You see, out of nowhere, it just stops at verse 1. Same thing happened to us in Daniel. There was one verse that just carried over. So, and then the last movement is going to be the Joseph story, right? And that's from Genesis 37, 2 all the way to 50, 26. Yes, Daniel? I can't hear you.
Yes.
Already know. Okay. So the reason why a lot of this stuff is pretty much split, right? So we have to figure out why are they in movements? What's going on as far as how are they because usually when you go to a song or a movie, there's always something that happens where it switches. There's still a connecting factor that pretty much puts it together. Now, what is it that links 1 through 4 together? You don't need to know the answer. It's okay. We're going to get there.
Go.
Go. The Holy Spirit or God's Ruach. That's what connects all this together.
And
Think of it like a binder, and each one has that little circle clip, and that's what connects them together every single time. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we've kind of already tried to make our brain think about it. It's what is that repeating word that we see over and over and over again? And so you'll see it when you read it again. If you already read it and you're going to read it again, look at the word, look for the word, and you'll see that it's being repeated multiple times.
So there's 8 passages with this link as far as in these movements, right? And once we get there, we will pretty much talk about it and kind of go over it, right? So next one, right? So the first movement, so every movement, it's not just hey, it's the movement you read 1 through 5 or 1 through 11 and you call it a day. Each movement has a section or a part. So for movement 1, as we talked about earlier, as far as from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 11, verse 26, there's parts. And this is the stuff we're going to start we're going to cover and walk through all these things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is actually going to be part 1 out of movement 1. So that's pretty much how it goes from chaos, which is, remember we talked about in the beginning, what was the world in the beginning?
Disorder,
waters, everything was kind of crazy, right? Then it goes to the Eden story, and then it goes to exile. And that's what we're going to cover first. That's what we're going to read first. And then the next portions is pretty much part 2. We have pretty much the flood story. And then we have pretty much part 3, which is the scatter of the nations. And that's how that movement ends, with those pretty much more specific pretty much ideas. Okay. So what we want you guys to do is, since we're going to do pretty much this first part as far as Genesis 1, 5 through 32, is until pretty much Friday. So next Friday when we come back and gather again, you guys will need to read all of that. As far as today's Friday, we have 7 days until pretty much Friday again, all right? So you have, what? A chapter a week? Yeah, go ahead. So you can do a chapter a day, or, because if usually if you do that, you think, I still got 3 or 4 more days. Don't worry, I'm going to wait until the very last day and read everything. You still need to take notes, because what we're going to do is, anytime, as far as next Friday, what's going to happen, whenever you guys gather again, we're going to say, all right, Daniel, tell me what happened in chapter 1. And you got to tell me. And after that, you also got to tell me, okay, whenever God's in there, as far as we're talking about pretty much the title God, who are we referring to? Right? And also, what was the main thing that happened in that thing as far as to summarize it? So we'll pick on any one of you guys, and obviously we're going to do, there's 4 different chapters. One person's going to take each chapter, right? And so every time we pull your stick, I'm going to leave it out. And that way next week, somebody else has the opportunity to actually answer. So that way, everybody's going to have a turn. Oh, you're studying that week.
Well, we have high expect.
The only day I'm free is
I can't hear anything.
I can't.
Okay. All right. So here's questions, right? And this will probably help you out as far as.
Guys, give it a second. We're almost done.
Excuse me. Thank you.
So, just like we gave you questions as far as the beginning of the intro, you're also gonna have these questions here. Pretty much is, who is God? So when you're actually reading pretty much chapters 1 through 5, what are we actually looking at? Who is it you're pretty much talking about when you actually read God? Yeah, we'll send it on the WhatsApp. That's fine. And we looked at earlier as far as what are his attributes. What are they saying he is in those 5 chapters? Just like we talked about earlier, what those attributes are, how are they actually defined in these chapters? Right? What's his character? And also, what is the pattern that you see in these 5 chapters? And the last part, that's going to be more to the pretty much second part, but it's okay as far as why is a garden so important?
I mean, it's still in this one, but
Exactly.
we'll talk about it. And then also, since we were starting about creation, I think there's one more question in there. Is like, what kind of patterns do you see with creation, the days that God created?
Yeah. That's pretty much what?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but really, okay, so I know for like, I go back to the people who are like me. Really, I'm not telling you to forget about how you guys were taught, but rather like challenge your brains to think about it differently. Like, don't read about it and be like, oh yes, I already know that. In the beginning, God created that. But like, read it with what you kind of learned today, or read it doing some like extra research. Challenge your brains to think further. I think that when you challenge yourself, you start to kind of like look and see and be able to what's the word I'm
That's
trying
probably
to say?
Visualize a little bit better as far as what you're
Visualize,
reading.
but I'm trying to say then you start really defining and seeing who really God is
Yeah,
in a
exactly
different
right.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all I got to say for that. For
Yeah, 'cause,
people like me.
Because obviously, like Genesis, right? When we go back and talk about Genesis, this is like one of the most important books, right? Because everything that happens afterwards, they go back and pretty much talk about this all the time. So even though, yes, you guys probably have read this multiple times, everybody has, still go back with the open eye. Kind of like Eric was saying earlier, you have a new subject you're gonna do pretty much in school. Even though you know math, it doesn't mean you know this specific topic again. And so just come at it again, like I said, like Daisy said earlier, just with a new beginning as far as trying to understand what you're reading.